I got this certificate, I'm this and this, and I'm applying. And it's like, no, you're not applying. You just told me all this stuff, and I'm going to send you a template email back saying, go to our site, click apply now, and apply for a job online, right? So the first thing I want to do is help you guys by saving you the time of sending me an email and telling me about how much you love Japan and how interested you are. I know, I know how interested you are. I know how much you love Japan. We all do, right? What I want to do is is for you to spend time making the application and not telling me about it. If you meet me, we can talk about it, right? But you got to make an application on our page first, right? So go to Interact Network, hit the apply now button, and go to the form and complete the form completely to the end. At the end, it will say submit for consideration. When you hit that submit for consideration button, that's when you've applied. That's that's the end of it, right? At that time, we'll have your application, and then we'll be able to contact you and uh, get the process started. But you have to commit. You have to click on the save and submit. It has to be submitted at the end. Um, Another thing we get is like when to apply. When should someone apply, Sonia?
Well, it depends on when they're planning or when they'd like to arrive in Japan. So, for example, now we've pretty much closed off applications for persons that would want to arrive in March of next year at the beginning of the school year. There might be a few openings left for the rest of spring, maybe later on arriving in May or June. But right now, you're probably going to be looking at a fall 2023 start if you're coming from overseas.
Right,
Um, and those arrivals would be traditionally mid-August, late August to start in September for the
right.
second term of the school year.
So we basically have two seasons. For the spring, people should apply early November, December. And for fall, you should be
Actually,
applying
way before then. They
way
can be
before.
applying way before then. Yeah. For overseas, for people coming from overseas, they
Mm-hmm.
can apply before that.
Okay.
Um, yeah, the season, the application or the season for accepting applications is a little bit longer than domestic.
Right.
Uh, so they can apply even maybe during the summer for the next spring, you
Okay.
know. Yes, yes.
And the
So
fall people should be applying right like now.
yes, just about now. Should be getting ready to submit your applications for fall positions. Yes.
Okay. And the steps here, submitting your online. Usually we do like a phone call, talk to people. It says here on our page, attend a seminar or online interview. That's now for overseas, all online interview, and for domestic as well.
Yeah.
Um,
COVID has changed the landscape a lot.
yeah,
So yeah.
exactly. Um, then we at the same time make an offer and receive documents, and then we follow up with the paperwork
The
and the
paperwork,
processing. Yeah.
yes, the paperwork and the processing so that they can actually arrive
Yep.
when they're scheduled to arrive.
Right. Okay, so you can see on our page as well more about this. And down at the bottom, there's some accordions that you can drop down and see more about it. Um, I also had a question this week about training, like when training was going to start. Yeah, training will start. Um there's some online things that they can give you before, and then they'll have training uh, after you arrive. So actually, the training schedule will be coordinated around the people who are arriving.
Hmm.
Because I think this person who had contacted me was worried that they would miss perhaps a training.
No,
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 that won't
not at
happen.
all. It's not going to happen.
Even if you do end up coming outside of the large groups or within, even if you come by yourself, if something happens and you can't arrive and
Mm.
you're, rescheduled to arrive at a later date, you'll still go through training.
Right,
Everybody gets the same kind of training um, program before they
right.
start working in schools.
That's right. So yeah, I just had another question that came to my mind. Not about training. I will come back to it. So another thing we get a question a lot about is what is considered native English, native English speaking, and a native English speaker, right?
Okay.
Um, you can see some of that on our requirements page, which is under the How to Apply tab on our site. It says on there you have to be a native speaker of English
Mhm.
or have received an education conducted in English for at least 12 years.
Right.
Yeah, we get a lot of questions about that.
Okay. Um, So for if you're coming to Japan to teach on an instructor visa in Japanese public schools, you're going to have to satisfy a requirement that you've been educated in the medium of English for at least 12 years. If you're coming to teach French in a public school, then it would be French. If it's Spanish, it would be Spanish.
Right.
And what that means is that your education or your education from elementary through to university, it has to be at least 12 years in English. If you, for example, went to international schools in countries that their native language is not English, then you would have to provide supporting documents to say that this school, the language that was used is English. Um, and that's just basically because that country that that school is located in,
Mm-hmm.
the official language of that country is not English.
Right.
So, for example, another example, if you're living in America since you're a child and you have a Mexican passport, you'll be
Right.
traveling to Japan on a Mexican passport. Because you're not traveling on a US passport, then you'd have to provide some evidence from the schools, even though they're in the United States. But the fact is that your passport is Mexican and the official language of Mexico is Spanish. So you'd
Right.
have to get letters from your schools in the US just to say that you were enrolled there, so that there is evidence that we can provide to immigration that, yes, indeed, you were educated in the US. And it
In
would be a
English.
foregone conclusion that it would be in English.
Right. Okay. That clears it up, I think,
Yeah.
for a lot of people. Um, yeah, I have
I,
questions about that.
I do have another, just one more point, and I've seen this kind of trend lately where a lot of, well, more individuals have been homeschooled.
Right.
Um, and that's not a problem, it's not an issue. But because it's homeschooled, um, you'd have to provide some sort of additional document, just an affidavit, um, just to say that, your name, that you are homeschooled, and the ordinance or the laws that govern homeschooling in your state. And then you'd have to have that notarized
Right.
and then sent to us. Again, it's just that we need some documentary proof, just
Right.
because it's um, outside of the formal school system.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something else to consider because I do know that a lot of persons, individuals, their families have chosen to homeschool their children. And again, as I said, that's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to make sure that
Is this
the
for the
paperwork
language
is there.
requirement? For the
Yes, for
education
the 12
requirement or the
years,
language requirement?
for the education
Oh,
requirement.
okay. That's interesting. I didn't know about that.
I've only seen it in the last maybe 2 years or so. So it is
Hmm.
fairly recent.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's getting more popular.
Yes, it is. It is
Hmm.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, that's something new there about homeschooling. If you're homeschooled, make sure that you get that paperwork done. Um, okay, so that's the other thing. I remember what I was going to say earlier. I get people ask me, "Oh, I'm an English teacher in my country. I have an IELTS score of 2.0 or something," or they say, "I have a Common European Framework score of 1A. That's the highest level. And,
Mhm.
can I work as an English teacher in Japan?" And I've never heard of anything about a testing requirement.
No, no, not for coming to teach English as an on an instructor visa. There's no testing requirement. Um, the requirements are basically that you have a bachelor's degree, that you've been educated in the medium of English for at least 12 years.
So there's no
Um,
way to test into getting that
they're
that
not there's no
requirement.
requirement. Yeah, there's no requirement for any testing. It's you have to basically be educated in English for 12
Hmm.
years, and you have to have a bachelor, at least a bachelor's degree
So it's a
to
time requirement,
yes, yes,
not a proficiency requirement.
exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Because, I mean, you could make the case that probably somebody who tested at a high level could maybe be better as an English speaker.
There's no doubt about that. I mean,
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who, because of technicalities, not a lot. I've seen maybe one or two instances in the entire time that I've been working here where we've couldn't move forward with processing, not because the candidate was not, didn't have a strong command of the English language. It's just that they wouldn't be able to satisfy the requirements set out by the immigration authorities.
Hmm.
So it's not to say that we doubt a person's proficiency or capability or competence in the language. It's just that when it comes to the actual legal documentation, we have to work within that framework that is set out by the immigration authorities. And that's the framework that they have set out. And so that's what we have to follow. Otherwise, we can't apply for the COE. We can't sponsor their work visa, basically.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's just one of those bureaucratic things.
Right. So you're either meeting the requirements or not.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, guys, it's not something that we can decide. It's not something that we can just make an exemption or say, like, "Oh, you're a good person. We're going to let you in." It's the Japanese government, and they don't make exceptions to this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure you're great and you'd be great with kids, but you got to meet the specifications, right? And if you meet the specifications, make an application on our site, interactnetwork.com, and start the process with this. And we'll see you over here. Um, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover today on different things regarding the immigration, or not immigration, the application process and the language requirement. I think our process is really easy and very streamlined
Hmm.
compared to some other places.
I think so.
Yeah, the JET program, their application process, quite long and very detailed. Um, I don't know about other ALT companies in the industry. I heard in the Eikaiwa world that they had two or three online and in-person interviews. Even I heard a rumor that one of these in-person events was a 3-hour event.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not. If you know, if you applied for somewhere and they gave you a very long event or a convoluted process, drop us a comment or send us a message on our site. We'd like to hear about it. But I've heard that, some places are quite involved and really long in the application process. Whereas I think we've made our application process easier to do.
Yeah, it's very straightforward,
Yeah.
very, very straightforward, you know,
Hmm.
very
Would
welcoming, very accommodating.
Yeah, I think so. Which is interesting because I think we get a lot of applicants, and I don't get a lot of complaints, or I don't hear a lot of people saying stuff about the application process. So I think it's where it should be.
Yes, I think so. I mean, you don't want someone filling out an application and then halfway through it becomes so tedious
Yeah,
that is you just give up. It's just too much.
right.
And I think, as you said, Brian, that I think our application process it just covers what we need to know to get the process going.
Hmm.
So yeah, apply. We're waiting for you.
Yeah, exactly. So, guys, I'm looking at our feed here. I don't see any questions today. Um, so, with that, we're going to end it, and we'll be back next week on Friday with another guest. And thank you, Sonia, for joining us today.
Not at all. Thank you for having me. It was really a
Sh-
pleasure.
sure. And you guys have a good weekend, and we'll see you next time.